This is the Asvine P36. It's a full-size cigar-shaped fountain pen with a very industrial design. The pen is mostly made out of a crystal clear turned acrylic, which makes it a demonstrator model, and it features titanium accents throughout. This pen was generously sent to me for review from Asvine. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you trusting me with your products. The top of the finial has a titanium finish and it has a rounded off edge. We then have a titanium bent metal clip, which is flexible, springy, and very functional. The cap is then mostly made out of clear acrylic and it gradually tapers, widening towards the bottom, where we have a two-piece titanium cap band. The bottom piece features some laser engraving. It says Asvine P36. There's then a slight step down to the barrel, and the cap unscrews in 1, 2 turns. And I'll note that the threads on the cap are made out of acrylic, but they mesh to threads on the grip section that are made out of titanium. Even though we have two different types of materials here, the threads feel very smooth, and I don't see any remnants of the acrylic on the titanium grip, so I think these threads should last a very long time. Once you remove the cap, you are greeted with a fully exposed number 6 size stainless steel nib. It is made in-house and it's available in a wide variety of sizes. Today I have the newly released 1.1 stub. And on the back we can see a pretty low profile black plastic feed. The grip section, as I mentioned, is made out of titanium. It has a nice hourglass shape, and then we have threads which are smooth to the touch. The barrel is then straight and again made out of clear acrylic. And then we have the end finial, which is made out of titanium. This model, as I mentioned, is the P36. The P in its name refers to this being a piston filler. If I turn this end finial, we'll see that it doubles as a piston knob, allowing you to extend the rod inside the pen. And if I turn that knob in the clockwise direction, the rod will retract, allowing you to bring ink directly into the barrel. This mechanism runs very smoothly and feels quite premium. In the hand, the pen is a comfortable length, suitable to use for both short notes and long writing sessions. It's well balanced with decent heft thanks to that piston unit. The cap does post deeply and securely. Because that cap is mostly made out of acrylic, it is quite lightweight and it doesn't really affect the balance of the pen. But I will note it does post directly onto this piston knob, so if you're not careful, you could accidentally actuate that piston rod when you're trying to remove the cap and create a pretty inky mess. In terms of size comparisons, here's the Asvine P36, a typical Pilot G2 rollerball pen, and your standard Sharpie. Before we disassemble the P36, I want to take a moment here to compare it with a few other fountain pens. First up, I have another demonstrator piston filler. This is the Mahjong P140. Unlike the P36, this does not have titanium accents. It just has gold-plated finishes, but it does feature a fully brass piston mechanism. This one is a bit larger than the P36. It is often compared to the Montblanc 149. Next, I have another piston filler from Asvine. This is the J16. This one is primarily made of titanium and it is not a demonstrator model, but it is another fountain pen made by Asvine that utilizes titanium. Speaking of titanium Asvine pens, I have one more Asvine model here. This is the V200. This one shares a lot more similarities with the P36. It is mostly made out of acrylic with titanium accents. This one features anodized accents, and at the time of recording, the P36 is not offered in other finishes. Also, I want to note that this one is the only non-piston filling fountain pen on the table today. This one is a vacuum filler. And then I wanted to bring in one last piston filler. This is the TWSBI Eco, which I have here in indigo and bronze. Of the pens on the table, this is the only one that is not a turned acrylic. This one uses injection molded plastic, and it's also the only one that's not made in China. This one comes from Taiwan. Let's take a look at these pens with their caps removed. All caps unscrew, and in the uncapped form, the pens are all pretty comparable in length. I would say the V200 and the TWSBI are a little bit longer than the rest. All nibs are fully exposed and all are stainless steel. The Mahjong is the only one with a number 8 size nib. The J16 has a Yovo-made nib. The other two Asvines have in-house nibs that are fully swappable, and then TWSBI uses a Yovo-made nib. In terms of grip sections, the TWSBI has a flare-out followed by a taper to threads, and then there's an O-ring to help secure the cap in place. The V200 and P36 have identical grip sections. In fact, the threads are also the same, and you can swap the cap on either pen. The J16 and the Mahjong then both have flare-ups followed by a taper to threads. The J16 also has a little bit of acrylic back here, which acts as an ink window. And let's take a look at these pens with their caps posted. All caps post securely. The Mahjong has the deepest posting cap, and it does not post onto the piston knob. The J16 and the P36 both have secure posting caps, but they do post directly onto the piston knobs. And then the V200 and the TWSBI post securely, but they do post with the help of some O-rings. In order to disassemble the P36, you are going to need the Asvine wrench, which came with the pen. And then you're also going to need some gripping materials. The cap unscrews. And you can clearly see there is no cap liner inside this, so there's no real need to disassemble this any further. For regular cleaning and maintenance, I would run this under warm water, maybe soak it with a little bit of mild detergent if you see really stubborn ink stains. For the nib and feed, you can grab them with your gripping material and give them a counterclockwise turn. Soon those will come out, and we can see that they are held in this nib collar. If we grab the nib and feed, we should be able to pull them straight out. And then they separate just like that. In terms of the rest of the pen, the grip section does not unscrew from the barrel, but we can remove the piston unit. I'm going to unscrew the back piston knob. Doing so reveals two flats, which we can grab a hold of with our wrench. I'm going to screw the piston knob down onto that wrench to ensure we have good contact, and then we're going to give it a clockwise turn. In general, I like turning with the barrel instead of the wrench to ensure I don't over torque and possibly cause some damage to the pen. Soon we can pull the entire piston unit out. And at this point, I typically won't disassemble this any further. For regular cleaning and maintenance, I would just run the piston rod and head under water and then apply a little bit of silicone grease to ensure we have good operation. But for the sake of this video, I will fully disassemble this. We'll go ahead and continue unscrewing that piston knob. Soon the rod will come out. And if we continue unscrewing, that will disassemble as well. We can remove a plastic key that was attached to that knob. And then we have a connector piece with a little trim ring. There's no real need to take that trim ring off, so I'm going to just leave it in place. At this point, the pen is fully disassembled. In order to reassemble, I'm going to start with the piston knob and this key. The key does have a series of ribs which mesh with ribs inside this knob. So we want to make sure that's fully seated. And then we're going to grab our connector piece and insert this into that. We're going to screw it down some, just about there, looks good. And then I'm going to grab my piston rod and insert that into the front of the connector piece. We're going to apply a little bit of pressure onto this rod to make sure that it is being caught by that key, and then we're going to screw it down. Now what we're looking for is when this rod is retracted, that the knob butts up against this first flange. And I actually appear to have gotten it right the first time. Reassembling piston units can be a little bit challenging, and I made a separate video, which I'll link to this one to help you with understanding how to troubleshoot this assembly. I'm going to put this into our barrel and give it a counterclockwise screw. Doing so will help these threads start getting into contact, and then it will also force the piston rod to start extending down. When we do that, we again have access to those flats, which I'll grab a hold of with our wrench. I'll screw down onto that wrench to get good contact before I apply a bit of torque to ensure that it's fully seated. Okay, at this point, the piston mechanism should be fully functional. That looks great. Next, let's focus on the nib unit. We're going to grab the feed and the nib collar. The collar is keyed, so in one orientation, the feed goes quite deeply. And then we're going to grab our nib and put that over our feed. I like looking at it from the back to ensure the nib is lined up with the shoulders of the feed. That looks just about perfect. We'll go ahead and screw this back into our pen and then reattach the cap. And at this point, we're ready to ink up. Inking up the P36, today I selected a blue ink from Iroshizuku. This is called Asagao. I really love using Iroshizuku inks in my demonstrator pens because they tend to just paint the walls with a beautiful tone. And this one is no exception. Let's go ahead and take the cap off this bottle of ink. And then we'll go over to our pen, take the cap off the pen, unscrew the back piston knob to extend the piston rod all the way down, put the nib into the ink, and screw up the piston. Typically, I would extend the piston rod one more time to get a full fill, but that actually looks like a really nice fill for this pen, so I'm going to stop there. Let's go ahead and wipe off our grip section, as well as our nib. I notice a little bit of staining on the top of that grip, so I'm going to wet this paper towel and see if we can get that perfectly clean. Okay, adding a little bit of water here. This is gonna help make sure I don't end up with inky fingers every time I write with this pen. That looks a lot better. I'm gonna go ahead and cap up the bottle of ink, as well as the pen. And at this point, we're ready to write. Okay, writing with the Asvine P36. Cap unscrews. And today we are writing with a stainless steel 1.1 stub. And it is a beautifully tuned nib. It's very smooth, wet with consistent ink flow. It actually has a little bit of bounce, which we'll take a look at in just a second. If I have anything negative to say about this nib, it's that it is a bit sensitive to rotation as you write, and that's pretty common for all stubs. Our ink, again, is from Iroshizuku, which is part of Pilot. And it is called Asagao. For flex, I'm going to turn the page. Here's without any extra pressure and adding some. Again, no pressure, adding some. You can see you actually get quite a bit of line variation putting some pressure down on the page. Asvine has created a very unique stub with this pen, and I really appreciate that extra flexibility. In terms of reverse writing, fairly smooth, at least on this paper. The ink is drying up quite a bit though. For me, I wouldn't really consider this a good reverse writer. For line variation, you naturally get some because of that stub-like characteristic. And then you can also, again, go heavy for a bit of extra variation. So, what do I think of the Asvine P36? I'm a big fan of this pen. I think the overall design aesthetic is beautiful. It's minimalist, sleek, very industrial looking. I love how they've married the look of titanium with crystal clear acrylic, and the fact that it's a demonstrator model. I think that it's great that Asvine decided to make this demonstrator model a piston filler that allows you to really appreciate how the piston mechanism works, as well as admire the color of your ink just by turning the pen in your hand. On top of that, the piston filling mechanism works very smoothly, and it's easy to disassemble, which means that this pen is easy to clean out and should be easy to maintain for many years to come. Also, in the hand, the pen is very comfortable. I especially like this hourglass-shaped grip. I find it's a great length for me, and it's very comfortable in the hand. On top of that, the cap can be posted securely without really drastically changing the balance of the pen, which means that it's a comfortable pen to use both posted and unposted. And when you do write with the pen, you're greeted with a very well-tuned nib. This nib is smooth, it's wet, and it is quite unique in terms of stubs in that it has a bit of bounce. I would almost characterize this as a soft stub, and I don't really have anything else like it in my collection. But I do see areas for improvement with this pen, and the nib is one of them. I find that it is quite sensitive to rotation as you write with the pen, so if you are one that tends to rotate your hands as you write, you may want to consider a different nib tipping size. Also, while I do find this grip section very comfortable, some people may find it a little bit slick, especially if you're sensitive to metal grips. Personally, I'm not usually sensitive to metal grips unless they're made out of anodized aluminum. For some reason, I do find those quite slick, but this one I have no issue with at all. And as I mentioned, the cap does post directly onto the piston knob, so if you are one that tends to post your cap, be careful with this one because you could accidentally rotate that knob and create a pretty inky mess. And then lastly, as I mentioned, this pen reminds me quite a bit of the Asvine V200. Now this model has been out for some time, and Asvine decided to release it in a few anodized finishes like what I have here today. I think it would be great if Asvine considered doing the same with the P36. Some people may really love it in that rainbow finish that I just showed, or maybe even black. But overall, I am a big fan of this pen. I love its industrial design. I love that it's a piston filler with a huge ink capacity. I think that it's a great pen that I can use to add some flourish to my writing thanks to the stub nib. And all of that is available for under $50 US, which to me is a fantastic value. And that just leaves me to say, thank you for watching.